ADHD 2.0, what they never taught you about your brain. What if everything you've been told about ADHD, the lack of willpower, the laziness, the inability to focus, was based on an outdated, incomplete picture of the brain? Because here's the truth. The science of ADHD has changed dramatically. And for millions of people, the old explanations weren't just wrong, they were actively harmful. I'm talking about the shame, the "why can't I just be normal" spiral. The years of trying harder at systems that were never built for your brain in the first place. Today, we're breaking down ADHD 2.0, the landmark book by Dr. Edward Hallowell and Dr. John Ratey, two Harvard-trained psychiatrists who have combined decades of research and clinical work to completely reframe what ADHD is, how it works, and most importantly, how people with ADHD can actually thrive. This is not a video about tips and tricks. This is about understanding your brain at a deeper level. Because when you understand the why, everything else starts to make more sense. Let's get into it. Section 1. What is ADHD 2.0? When most people think about ADHD, they picture a kid who can't sit still in class. But Hallowell and Ratey argue that this picture is decades out of date. ADHD 2.0 isn't just a sequel to their original groundbreaking book Driven to Distraction. It's a complete reimagining of what this condition means, informed by new neuroscience, new treatment approaches, and a fundamentally different philosophy about what it means to have ADHD. The core argument of the book is this: ADHD is not a disorder of attention. It's a disorder of attention regulation. People with ADHD don't lack the ability to focus. They actually hyperfocus intensely on things that interest them. What's dysregulated is the ability to control that focus, to direct it where and when it needs to go. This distinction matters enormously. It shifts ADHD from a moral failing to a neurological difference. And that shift, from shame to science, is the heartbeat of this entire book. Hallowell and Ratey also reject the idea that ADHD is simply a liability. Instead, they frame it as a trait with both challenges and gifts. A Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes. Powerful, fast, capable of extraordinary performance, but requiring the right conditions and support to operate well. That reframe alone is worth the price of the book. Section 2. The default mode network, the neuroscience. You need one of the most significant updates in ADHD 2.0 is the introduction of new brain science, specifically the role of the default mode network, or DMN. Here's how this works. Your brain has two primary operating modes. The first is the task-positive network. This is the focused, goal-directed part of your brain that activates when you're working on something. The second is the default mode network, the part that activates when you're at rest, daydreaming, mind-wandering, or thinking about yourself and others. In neurotypical brains, these two networks take turns. When the task-positive network is active, the default mode network quiets down. They work in alternation, like a seesaw. But in brains with ADHD, this alternation is disrupted. The default mode network keeps firing even when the task-positive network is supposed to be running the show. This is why a person with ADHD can be sitting in the most important meeting of the day and find their brain suddenly somewhere else entirely. Planning a vacation, replaying a conversation from 3 years ago, or wondering what would happen if dogs could talk. It's not a character flaw. It's literally what their brain is doing. This understanding changes everything about how we approach treatment and support. It also explains why stimulant medications can be effective. They help regulate the interplay between these networks, allowing the task-positive network to hold the floor longer. But medication is only one piece of the puzzle. And Hallowell and Ratey are very clear that no single intervention is sufficient on its own. Section 3. VAST, a new and better framework. One of the most provocative ideas in ADHD 2.0 is that the name ADHD itself may be doing more harm than good. Hallowell and Ratey propose propose an alternative framework called VAST, Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. And their argument is that VAST more accurately captures what this trait is and how it shows up in people. Here's why this matters. The term attention deficit hyperactivity disorder frames the condition entirely in terms of deficits. It tells you what's wrong. It medicalizes a human variation that has, throughout history, been both a liability in some environments and an incredible advantage in others. VAST reframes the trait as a variation in how attention is processed, driven by the need for stimulation. This shift acknowledges that people with VAST don't have attention deficits. They have attention that's incredibly responsive to interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, and passion. Think about that. These are some of the most powerful human motivators. The VAST brain isn't broken. It just requires engagement. And when it's engaged, watch out. Hallowell and Ratey use the VAST framework to help people identify whether their struggles and gifts fit the pattern. Not just for formal diagnosis, but as a way of building self-understanding and compassion. Because here's the thing they keep coming back to. Self-knowledge is itself a treatment. When you understand your brain, you stop fighting it. Section 4. The biggest ADHD triggers. What makes it worse? Understanding ADHD 2.0 also means understanding the conditions that make the ADHD brain struggle most. And Hallowell and Ratey are specific about this. The number one enemy of the ADHD brain is what they call toxic stress. Not the productive kind of pressure that sharpens performance, but chronic, unrelenting stress that floods the system with cortisol and depletes the very neurochemicals that help regulate focus and emotion. When someone with ADHD is in a state of chronic stress, whether from a chaotic environment, an unsupportive relationship, financial pressure, or the constant exhaustion of masking, their ability to regulate attention drops significantly. They're not underperforming because they don't care. They're underperforming because their nervous system is overwhelmed. The second major trigger is screen exposure, specifically the dopamine-flooding nature of social media, gaming, and constant digital stimulation. The ADHD brain is particularly vulnerable to the reward cycles of digital content because it's already wired to chase novelty and stimulation. Screens scratch that itch, but in a way that leaves the brain less capable of tolerating slower, deeper engagement. Hallowell and Ratey aren't anti-technology, but they're clear that unmanaged screen time is one of the most significant exacerbating factors for ADHD symptoms in the modern world. And the third major trigger is disconnection, which brings us to one of the most powerful and surprising ideas in the entire book. Section 5. Connection as medicine. If there's one idea in ADHD 2.0 that deserves to be on a billboard, it's this. Human connection is the single most powerful treatment for ADHD. Not medication, not therapy, not productivity systems. Connection. Hallowell and Ratey describe something they call the human moment, an in-person interaction where two people are fully present with each other, emotionally and physically. And their research shows that these moments of real connection directly regulate the ADHD nervous system in ways that nothing else can replicate. This isn't just feel-good philosophy, it's neuroscience. When humans experience genuine connection, it activates the brain's reward circuits, reduces cortisol, and promotes the kind of emotional regulation that the ADHD brain struggles with. What this means practically is that isolation is especially dangerous for people with ADHD. When someone with ADHD withdraws, whether due to shame, burnout, or the social fallout of ADHD-related struggles, they lose access to one of their most essential regulatory tools. The prescription Hallowell and Ratey offer is simple but not easy. Invest in your relationships. Find your people. Create structures that keep you connected to others, whether through a therapist, a coach, a close friend, a peer group, or a romantic partner who understands and supports your brain. They also make an important point about the therapeutic relationship specifically. For people with ADHD, having a doctor, therapist, or coach who genuinely sees them, not just their symptoms, can be transformative. The relationship itself is therapeutic. Section 6. Exercise, sleep, and nutrition. The lifestyle trinity Hallowell and Ratey spend significant time in ADHD 2.0 on what they call the lifestyle factors, the non-negotiable physical foundations that either support or sabotage the ADHD brain. Let's start with exercise, because they are emphatic about this. Exercise is the single most underutilized treatment for ADHD. Full stop. Dr. Ratey literally wrote a book called Spark about the neuroscience of exercise and the brain, so he brings serious depth to this. What the research shows is that vigorous physical activity increases dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in the brain, the exact same neurotransmitters that ADHD medications target. Exercise essentially provides a natural, temporary dose of the neurochemicals the ADHD brain is chronically undersupplied with. The recommendation isn't a gentle walk. It's vigorous movement, ideally something that involves rhythm, coordination, and even social connection, like martial arts, dance, team sports, or climbing. Sleep comes next. This is where many people with ADHD unknowingly undermine everything else they're doing. The ADHD brain has a known tendency toward delayed sleep phase, meaning the natural internal clock is shifted. Later, making it hard to fall asleep at conventional times, and even harder to wake up. Chronic sleep deprivation doesn't just make ADHD harder to manage, it mimics many of the core symptoms of ADHD itself. Hallowell and Ratey are clear. Protecting sleep isn't optional. It's treatment. Nutrition rounds out the trinity. They advocate for a brain-supportive diet high in protein, healthy fats, and omega-3 fatty acids, all of which are critical for neurotransmitter production and brain function. And they're direct about what to avoid: highly processed foods and sugar spikes that create the neurochemical crashes that the ADHD brain is already prone to. Section 7. Finding your right difficult. Strength-based ADHD. The final concept I want to leave you with is one of the most hopeful in the entire book, and it's something Hallowell and Ratey come back to again and again. They describe the ADHD brain as one that thrives when it finds what they call the right difficult, a challenge that is hard enough to be stimulating, interesting enough to sustain engagement, and meaningful enough to matter. When someone with ADHD finds that sweet spot, whether it's a career, a creative pursuit, a cause, or a problem to solve, the so-called deficits often transform into extraordinary strengths. The relentless curiosity becomes innovation. The intensity becomes passion. The distractibility becomes the ability to notice things others miss. This is not a self-help cliché. Hallowell and Ratey document this pattern across their decades of clinical work. People who spent years feeling like failures, who found the right context, the right challenge, the right support, and then became some of the most creative, driven, and impactful people in their fields. The work, they argue, isn't about fixing yourself. It's about knowing yourself deeply enough to build a life that works with your brain rather than against it. ADHD 2.0 is ultimately a book about hope, not the toxic positivity kind, but the grounded, science-backed, hard-won kind that comes from actually understanding what's happening in your brain and what you can do about it. Whether you have ADHD, suspect you might, love someone who does, or work with people who do, this book is worth your time. And honestly, the reframe it offers, from deficit to difference, from disorder to trait, has implications for all of us. If you want all of the key ideas from ADHD 2.0 distilled into one beautifully designed, easy-to-reference cheat sheet, I made one for you. The link is in the description. It covers every major concept we talked about today, plus a few more, in a format you can actually use. If this video helped you understand your brain a little better, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And I'll see you in the next one.